89. So I would have been about 10, 14. So I was about 14 when it happened. I remember it happening in our community. Imagine what happens in our community when somebody gets hurt bad. Everybody knows about it, right? I remember when it happened, it scalped him, kind of ripped the skin off his head, cracked his skull way bad. And I remember that the big concern that we thought he was going to die was because of the head injuries. Well, there were some significant head injuries. It's about an hour and a half off the top of Boulder. What was interesting about that, in high school, and this is the part he hasn't told the other groups about, in high school he decided to play baseball and basketball. His junior year, he was the MVP, 1A MVP in baseball. He was a pitcher. And you wonder, how did he play baseball with one arm? It's something to see. So he has mitt, catch the ball, flip the ball up, throw the mitt off, catch the ball out of midair, and then huck it. And then he also pitched, played first base, played third a little bit.
I played
Shortstop.
Catcher.
So if you consider what the shortstop does, I don't know how many of you watch baseball, but it was a pretty amazing thing to see. Basketball, again, catch, shoot with one arm, played out on the guard line. You wonder how you play on the guard line with one arm. He did it, excelled. There's another story that he didn't tell. I'm going to tell him. So when he was a senior, he got called by, who was it? Good Morning America. Thought that was a pretty cool thing because they'd done well. They said, hey, we want to fly you back here to Good Morning America to be on the show. And Porter says, you know what? I'm not going to come without my team. And the other network wanted him as well, so he kind of used that and pretty well didn't go back without his team, so he took the other kids on his team back. I think it's a really strong illustration of what Porter is and some of the things that's driven him. After high school, went and served a mission in Los Angeles, Spanish speaking, came back from there, went to BYU, did okay. We're going to learn about that in a minute. Went and did some work, decided, and he's going to explain this a little more in depth, decided to go to Baylor. I don't know, probably most of us have heard of Baylor now. I don't know what I'm doing wrong with this thing. After last night, take that off. Or if I spit on you, I stand back. Thanks. So went to Baylor, and while he was at Baylor, got recruited by the Chiefs. Became the personal assistant to Coach Andy Reid. Did that for a few years, and then recently, last year, he was the coach of the, say it again?
It's called Quality Control Coach.
Quality Control Coach. Basically, he works with the quarterbacks and tight ends. So two of the most famous players on the Chiefs are Porter's good friends. I thought it was interesting. He texts Mahomes quite often. He had a bunch of texts. Maybe one of them from Mahomes. Yesterday it was. So, pretty cool. Now the why behind today. And I'm just going to say it because this is the learning objective. And all good teachers want to say the learning objectives before we start. COVID has been kind of tough. This year has been kind of tough. What we keep hearing is, and I'm scared, I'm fearful of this, that there's this prevalent victim mentality starting to take root in our community. We're starting to be able to say, yeah, but, this hard thing happened, and so, yeah, I'm going to quit. Or, yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore. Or, yeah, I'm going to give up on my dream. Or, yeah, whatever. And as we talked about this, as we processed this, Superintendent and I, it dawned on me, I said, I know a guy. I know a guy who could argue that he's been dealt a really cruddy hand. He's had some really difficult things happen. It would have been really easy for this guy to just give up and to quit and to use it as an excuse. But he didn't, and he's actually gone on and done some really great things. I think another thing that we sometimes think is when we hear somebody that's had some pretty decent success, we're like, oh yeah, but they probably were the straight A student, the perfect, was endowed with all this talent and ability. Porter was not a great student.
I had a lot of fun.
And he encountered and experienced a lot of failure, a lot of setbacks. But what Porter does have, and that I hope you take away from his experience and his stories today, is he never, ever quit. He always kept trying. He always got back up. He didn't give up on his dreams. And he put the time in and did the hard work. And so with that, you guys, Porter Ellett.
We good? Can you hear me? Okay. All right, this is fun. It's nice to talk to older people. This is good. No, the younger kids are fun, but this is good. When Weston was talking, he talked about, you know, being dealt a bad hand. Does anybody play cards at all? Like, I mean, not necessarily poker or whatever, but just cards in general. I watch poker because it's on ESPN sometimes, so you just kind of watch it, but it's interesting to me. But it's an interesting game, right? Because the hand you're dealt doesn't really matter, right? You can bluff your way out of any hand. You can win, right? So it's really not the hand you're dealt, it's what you do with it. So and I think that that's what we're talking about today, okay? It's like we have excuses that we could take, we have challenges that we might face, but you can do what you want with it. So this year's been an interesting year, like Weston talked about. What a year, huh? How about that? You guys that are like seniors, Riley, that's an interesting senior year for sure. You guys can't do a lot of things that you're used to doing, right? You can't go out, you can't, you know, you couldn't go to parties or whatever. Some of you probably did. If I was a senior, I would have gone out. I would not, you know. So for those of you guys who didn't, great, good job. Me, would have been a rough go, but no, good job. Oh, good, seriously. But so interesting year, right? A hard year by anybody's judgment. A lot of changes. You got to wear a mask every day. The mask would have been hard on me too. I would have been pretty rebellious, but so we dealt with it in my work too, right? We didn't know if we were going to have a season, so we dealt with a lot of that stuff. We had to wear a mask every day. I'll talk about it a little bit more, but my year, my 2020 started out real well, right? You guys watch the Super Bowl at all? Right? We had a great start to 2020. February 2nd, good start. We win the game. We're down late in the game, but we come back and we take care of business. It was pretty crazy, really wild. But you know, we're holding the trophy at the end of the day. And I brought this, so when you win the Super Bowl, they give you an option. You can get a trophy like Lombardi. I mean, it's not the Lombardi, that's at Ellett Stadium, but this is my personal one. Coach Reed gave us all a trophy as a gift because I couldn't really afford it really on my own, so he got it for us, and then they give you a Super Bowl ring, right? So those are over there. And then after we're done, I want you guys can come look at it, you can hold it, take a picture, you know. I was a sports nut growing up, and if anyone ever would have told me, like, you'd hold a Super Bowl ring, I would have been like, what? Like, I never would have thought I would have ever held one or saw one. So I think that it's, like, I want you guys to be able to say that you've held it, right? You've looked at it, you've seen one. And I think also it helps you see, like, you can do that too, right? I never thought it would happen. Like, have my own Super Bowl ring, that's pretty far-fetched. So I want you to be able to do that. But so our 2020 started out real well, and then things got weird, and then it ended terribly. So I'm still calling this 2020. But at the end of, you know, February this year, we're in the Super Bowl again, and Tom Brady did what Tom Brady does, messed us up. So, oh, get out of here. You and my mom, I have to hear from my mom too. Half the time my mom's in like a Patriots hat or something. She used to be, now it's like TB12. I don't know, whatever. Stupid diet, Tom Brady. But so earlier in the year, we played Tampa Bay, right? We played them earlier in the year. Tyreek, you guys know Tyreek, right? Tyreek Hill, fastest guy in the NFL. He's crazy. He's crazy fast too. But so the first quarter of that game, he had like 250 yards receiving, just like torched them, just like embarrassing for everybody on Tampa Bay. So in one of his plays, his trademark is he's out running everybody. He gives them a peace sign right on his way into the end zone. Well, they remembered that, obviously. So when we're losing the game, it's pretty much over. Mr. Winfield Jr. felt like this was a good time to, you know, hey, peace, buddy, we're out of here. So we'll remember that, so that's good for us going into this year. But it was a rough ending. It was about how everyone's 2020 was, I think, like, oh yeah, good year. Oh, no, not great, right? So we're all dealing with that. And I'm just kind of illustrating this to show you that everybody dealt with it, right? We were all in that together. It was different for all of us. And then we weren't even sure, like I said, we weren't even sure we were going to get to play. So we got tested every single day, every player, every coach, everyone who was around any player, any coach, got tested every single day, right? And then if any of those came back, false positive or positive, right, you got tested again, you had quarantine. So there's a lot of that going on. We had coaches who their family were high risk, so they didn't see their family all season. They stayed in a hotel for the whole season. So there's a lot of that going on. Different year. But today I want to talk about the challenges that we have, right, and the struggles that we face, but also how we overcome them. And a lot of them are examples from the season that we had, some things that we went through, but also just in my own life and things that I've seen around me. So the first one I want to talk about, I'll just go through these quickly and then we'll talk about them more as we go. The first one is make excuses or make it happen. Pretty self-explanatory, but we got some good examples we'll talk about a little bit. There's no perfect situation. I think we all have like a pie in the sky thought of what's perfect, or, you know, life would be easier if it was like this. That's just not the case. The third one is failure is a tool, right? So we all fail in life. Every day we fail in some way or another, right? There's days where I get up and you fail, like you just do. You have a bad day. It's a rough day. But you can learn and grow from it, so we'll talk about that. The last one is perspective is power. So as we kind of go through and we talk about these things, I want you guys, you can think of questions you have for me. You know, it can be about like growing up with one arm, or it can be about the team, you know, or players. I don't care. I'm pretty open to answering anything. But just think about those. And then at the end, we're going to try to give you plenty of time to ask whatever you want. We can just kind of have a discussion. But I like that better than just me talking. So we'll kind of go through this faster. First one, right? Make excuses or make it happen, right? Baylor last night, who watched the game? All right. Who watched just the first half because Baylor killed them? That was awesome, right? Who was cheering for Gonzaga? We probably have a few Gonzaga. Sorry, guys. I kind of wanted to see Mark Few win a little bit, but I did go to Baylor, so I wanted them to win. But interesting story about Baylor, okay? So Coach Scott Drew, he's the head coach there. He took over, I think it was in 2002, he took over. The year before he got there, one player murdered another player on the team, right? So the discussion was, and then the coach at the time tried to help cover it up. So the discussion at the time was, do we get rid of basketball altogether? Do we get rid of the program? Do we shut it down? Or do we try to save it? So they hired Scott Drew to come into that, right? So he walks in, and in his first interview, he gets up and he says, we're going to build a program that goes to the tournament. We don't just go to the tournament, we win games in the tournament. And everybody around the program thought, this dude's a whack job, right? This team is not doing that, right? So here we are, 2021, right? 19 years later, 18 years, whatever it is, and they won a national championship. So I think it's a great example. If he walked in the door and he had the best built-in excuse ever, right? They were going to shut down this program before I got here. It's garbage. But he didn't do that, right? He didn't make an excuse. He just made it happen. They went out and they won a national championship yesterday. So I think with our current situation, we'll talk about it more, but another good example is Travis Kelce. So Kelce, this last year, he had, everybody know what position, everybody know Travis Kelce? Who doesn't know Travis Kelce? We've got a few that maybe don't. So he's our tight end. He's awesome. He's a great player. This last year, he broke the record for most receiving yards by a tight end. I mean, in my opinion, just because I work with him, I'm a little biased. He's probably the best tight end to ever do it, like period. I don't think anybody's better than him. So and you'll argue like Gronkowski or whatever, George Kittle, get out of here, whatever. He's doing it. So I love Travis Kelce, right? And in practice one day, I throw to him in practice, and I threw to him. He came back and he was holding his hand. He's like, man, ouch. And I was like, what's going on? Are you okay? And he said, well, it's my finger. It keeps slipping in and out of place. I was like, oh, that's not good. You know, but in my head, I'm like, oh, we're going to miss this guy for like 6 weeks. This is going to be bad news. And he goes, that's been doing it all year. It's been happening all season. I was like, well, how do you get it better? Can you get it better? And he's like, well, I get it better Monday, Tuesday, and then we practice on Wednesday, and the first throw messes it up again. So like, I'm just going to have to deal with it. Right? But he had an excuse all year. Like, oh, I'm going to miss 4 games because my finger's messed up. And he's a receiver, right? Your hands are the most important part of everything you're doing there. So he had a built-in excuse, but he didn't do it, right? He went out and set a record instead. So I think that's a pretty good example for us, right? Don't make an excuse. Don't use an excuse. Right? Just go out and do the job, right? Up to your ability level. He just happens to be the best in the world at it. So next example. So my mom, this is my mom on the left here, and this is my dad, right? They own a farm in Wayne County, right? Good farm people. They're awesome. They're the best. So my mom, she's a Tom Brady fan, like I said. So she's funny story actually. So my first season in the league, we played the Patriots. We can we can have family come to games and stuff. But so my mom came out. We played New England in New England. So she came to a game. And then the next year we played him in New England again. I don't know how that happens, but somehow we played him. We play Tom Brady on his home field all the time. He never comes to Kansas City, so whatever. It's a one-way street, I guess. But so we went out there the next year, but we do this thing where our wives get to go to one away game with us. So I told my mom, hey, you're not going to see me, I'll be with my wife. I won't be able to come just hang out or anything. And she was like, well, we're not coming to see you. We're coming to see Tom Brady. Sweet, thanks. So my mom, after this Super Bowl, I called her, and I was like, I'm sorry, we let you down. Because after the game, if you win the Super Bowl, people come down on the field, they're in the confetti, everybody gets to see the trophy, take pictures, It's really, really cool. And then when you lose, it's just like you walk through the other team's confetti, which is awesome in every way. But so I called her up and I was like, hey, I'm sorry, I apologize, we let you down. It's terrible. And we didn't just get beat, we got smoked. We didn't play well. So I said sorry, and she was like, oh, Port, she cut me off. She's like, Porter, are you kidding? She's like, I never thought I would even go to a Super Bowl ever. And she's like, and I've gone to 2. And I just thought, on the phone call with her, I was like, that's unbelievable. Here I am, sorry, Mom, we messed it up. And she's thinking about how grateful she is just to be there. So it was a good perspective for me, no, man, I coached in 2 Super Bowls. I lost one, which sucks, but we won one. And then also just to realize, later on, she said, I never even thought I would watch a football game in person like that. So you think about that too, right? I went to a high school, you guys know Wayne High School, we don't even have a football team, right? So for me, I went to one NFL game to watch, and that's how I met Coach Reed. And the next NFL game I went to, I was on the sidelines. And it was only probably the 4th or 5th game. Well, actually, it was only the 3rd game outside of BYU games that I've been to, my whole life. So I was on the sideline at an NFL game. So you think about that, just her attitude. She's just grateful for it. But she taught me that, right? She taught me you don't make excuses. Right? The situation, you lost the game, who cares? You move on, whatever. But she also taught me growing up those same things. She taught me to tie my shoe with one hand. When I was really little, I wanted to go play with friends. There was a fence that was keeping me from, my friends all climbed over the fence, they were playing, and I couldn't climb the fence with one hand. I couldn't figure it out. So I came back to her and I was like, hey Mom, will you help me over the fence? And there was another parent that was sitting by her, and my mom was like, no, you gotta figure it out. Go figure it out. And the other parent probably, she says it in her own words, she's like, I thought she was being really harsh as a parent. That's rude. You have a kid with one hand, he needs your help, and you just told him to shove it, basically. So, but she told me, go try it. And I was like, figure it out. So I went, and I figured it out on my own. And the parent who was there, she said, as time went on, I could see what your mother was doing. I could see how she was developing you into your own person. Helping you face challenges and overcome them. And helping you, if my mom would have just babied me the whole time, I wouldn't have played baseball, right? I wouldn't have played basketball, I wouldn't have run track or cross country. I wouldn't have done any of that stuff. I never would have tried to coach in the NFL. I didn't even play football. That's crazy. But no, she taught me, hey, go try it. Figure it out. Don't be scared if you fell. And don't have an excuse beforehand, right? And I think talking about excuses in general, with you guys amongst your peers, but also the teachers and adults in the room too. I want to challenge you guys not to make excuses for each other, right? You don't need that. You don't need people to stand around and say like, oh, you know, well, you're not the sharpest tool in the shed. You know, oh, well, you got one arm, so that's hard, that's rough. Or, you know, you grew up in the sticks, so you can't go on and do anything. You're from the country. Like, you don't need that, right? You don't need to say it, you don't need to hear it, and you don't need it from anybody else. So I would challenge you guys to do that for each other, right? Don't build in excuses. Like, one thing that I've realized about the pandemic is that everybody who wanted an excuse got one, right? They found one to not do it, right? To struggle, to fail, right? Oh, I had to do classes from home. I had to do them online. That's hard, so I don't get A's. Yeah, like so. There's kids that do online classes all the time get straight A's, right? There's kids that wear masks all the time. They do fine, right? And then it's like our players had to build an excuse for the whole season. Oh, you know, we should be playing. We shouldn't be around each other. But they showed up every day, right? They took the test. They were at practice. They sat out 10 days. If they tested positive, they came back. One thing for me that was pretty cool is the things that we've learned from it, right? I hadn't been on Zoom calls, like, ever. I'd FaceTime. Like, I'd done that stuff. You guys use Microsoft Teams at all? You ever heard of Microsoft Teams? I had no idea what that is, but I used it every day. It's like an awesome tool on Microsoft. It's one of those things where you like open up the app, you're like, whoa, I could have been doing this the whole time. Like, there's an app that does this for me. So I learned from that, right? And then also, so part of my job right now, I draw pictures for the playbook. I like help with that process, and I print the playbook, I put the playbook together, like I do all that stuff. So the week of our first playoff game, we had a bye week before our first playoff game, we played the Browns. I tested positive for COVID-19, so I was out 10 days. It actually ended up being like 14 because they wanted to be safe. But I did the whole playbook for that game in the basement of my house, right? And all I needed help with was somebody had to grab the papers off the printer. Right? Like, that stuff's pretty amazing. And we never would have known that if it wasn't for the problems with the pandemic, right? But I hope you guys, if anything from the pandemic, you've learned, like, we can adjust, we can deal, like, we can change things up and fix things and do it the way we need to. But it has been a struggle. But don't use it as an excuse, right? Don't ever have an excuse. The second one I want to talk about is there's no perfect situation. I like this example, right? Because you guys, I mean, you probably see this around here. There's rocks and stuff. But it's always amazing to me how there's, like, plants on the rocks, right? It's, like, weird. Trees aren't supposed to grow on rocks. That's not the way it's supposed to go. But also, on the other hand, you think the seed chose the land right there? You know what I'll do? I'm going to choose a rock. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to grow out of this rock right here. I don't think a seed would do that, right? But they grow where they're planted. So it's amazing to me that the situation, right? That's not perfect for that tree. It's not perfect for that seed. But does it matter at the end of the day? No. It takes care of what it needs to take care of. And there are a lot of examples of this around me, I thought. Like, perfect situations don't exist. Right? You guys, I think, actually, from my point of view, are in as close to a perfect situation as, I mean, I can create. Right? You have, like, an awesome school. I was just over the elementary school in Lake Town. And the gym over there is, like, the most incredible thing I've ever, I'm like, man, this is awesome. I told Weston there's like a closet on the side. I would have just slept in the closet. I would have just lived here. My parents would have known where I was. I would just play ball and slept in there. Well, like, you have awesome technology. You got great teachers, right? You have a community that supports you. Like, they care about sports. They care about school. They care about all that stuff. So, like, from where I'm coming from, Kansas City, I look at this and I'm like, man, my kids could really do well here, right? Like, this would be a great place for them. So to me, I think this is pretty close to perfect. It's not. I know it's not. And there isn't a perfect situation. Because it's not like you guys can't go do an internship for the Chiefs either, right? There's not a pro football team anywhere close for that. But I get that. You have almost everything you need here. An example of the opposite, right, which I think is pretty amazing, is one of our players. His name is, what do you guys know him? You guys know his nickname probably. You guys know who this guy is? Honey Badger. Yeah, this is the Honey Badger. So Tyrann Mathieu, right? They call him Honey Badger because he plays like a honey badger. That's kind of an old YouTube video, I think, Honey Badger, but I said Honey Badger don't care, right? It's the video of the Honey Badger. He's killing a cobra, right? He's just like killing a cobra for fun. But So he plays like that. He just doesn't care. He's everywhere. He's in everybody's business. He's yelling at everybody. And he's the kind of guy that, he's an awesome leader. He's awesome to have on your team. But if you ever had to go against him, he's a nightmare. Like, he is a nightmare to play against because of everything he does, everything he says. Like, he's a special player, though, right? Special person as well. He's a good person. He grew up in New Orleans. And he grew up in a really tough area of New Orleans. They call it the Ninth Ward, right? And they had hurricanes and stuff when he was growing up. I asked him about it because I was interested in school, like with COVID, right? I thought, hey, when you were gone for a hurricane, how does school work? He said, well, we would evacuate, you know, so usually a lot of those people go to like Texas, or they go, you know, California even. So they would go evacuate for a while, and they'd come back. And he told me at one point he missed like a year of school. He just wasn't in school. And then when he came back, they were in trailers, temporary trailers, and they didn't have like homes still. They were still working on fixing their homes. So they didn't have food. So the government would come by in trucks and hand them like sack lunches out of these trucks. Right, so that's what they were getting. They didn't have a real school, right? They didn't have food, and they didn't have a home. So that's pretty tough, right? That's not a perfect situation. That's the opposite of perfect. But it didn't stop him. Right? He was all-pro this year. He's been all-pro a couple times. He's an incredible player, and then he's worked on becoming an incredible person as well. So I think you look at him, right? That's not a perfect situation, right? And he can use it for an excuse. He can say, you know, I grew up here. I can't make it. People like me don't do that. That we don't get out of here. But he did, right? And I encourage you guys to be, like, you can be that guy. Like, you can be, you know, you can go out. You can do what you want, right? You can excel. Maybe you're not quite as crazy as the Honey Badger or as athletic, but, you know, you can do what you want. So, not a perfect situation. The last example of this I want to talk about is my dad. So my father, he grew up on a farm, you know, like all of us do. His dad owned, like, gas stations and stuff as well. But his father, when he was growing up, he was an alcoholic. So he wasn't home much, right? And when he was, it was not good. So it's a tough situation for my dad to grow up in. And it's easy to be bitter about that, right? And I mean, a lot of you guys are probably dealing with, I don't know what you're dealing with. I don't even want to pretend like I know what you're dealing with. But maybe you are dealing with something like that. But he could have used that to be bitter, right? Angry, mad. He could have been a bad dad himself, right? The excuse is there. My dad was an alcoholic. I'm not a good dad because I didn't have a good dad. It's built in, right? But instead, he's like the best dad ever, right? He's awesome. He's incredible. And he's like a good guy just to talk to be around. I mean, if you ever, I don't know if you'd ever recognize him, but if you ever see him in anything, you can just go up and talk to him. He'll act like he knows you. Like, he's like your best friend. Even though he's like never met you. He'll be like, yeah, all right. You'll have a full conversation with him. I promise. But he's a perfect example of me of that, right? Not a good situation. Not a good place to be. But not letting it overwhelm you. The next one I want to talk about is failure is a tool, right? So we fail in life. This is a commercial that came out, I think I was young. I mean, it's a Michael Jordan commercial when he was still playing. So it's an older commercial. I love Michael Jordan. Always have, right? Always will. But he talks a lot about failure in this. And I just want to, we'll use it to apply it to the lesson.
Canyon,
Weston, use your mic.
plug that thing.
I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed.
So the last line is really what I like the most, right? He says, I fell over and over and over again in my life, and that's why I succeed. So it doesn't make sense if you think about it like logically, right? That failure doesn't make us better. But it does if you learn from it and you grow, right? You take the failure, you move on, you get better, right? And that's the key to a lot of the most successful people you're around, is how they internalize failure, right? Do they use it to build them up, or do they use it to destroy themselves? And that's a big difference between those who become someone great and those who continue to suffer, continue to struggle, right? So a good example of that one is Well, so when I was in college, this is what Weston was getting to, my schooling. So I was like a good, okay student, not a great student. But like I said, I had fun. I had fun in school. I got, in high school, I don't know, nothing spectacular. But what I did is I messed up.
Well,
Yeah, okay.
I'm not saying you're a bad student, but
No,
sometimes we think that people who go find success must have been a straight A, must have got like a 36 on their ACT. What I wanted to illustrate is, you did it.
Yeah, I did.
There's nobody else who did
Yeah.
success.
So,
That's what I'm saying.
yeah, I did. Yeah, no, yeah. I was a good student, by all accounts, I guess. Unless you ask some of my teachers. I was like the worst kid to have in class, probably. But I got okay grades sometimes, most of the time. But so, in high school, I messed up because, so you guys, you take the college courses, right? You can get like your associates before you graduate. Is that true? Yeah. So we took those classes, and I took a few of them, enough that I had like 2 years worth of credits, I think. I don't know, close to an associate's, a lot of credits. And I got to BYU after my mission, and they're like, hey, which I don't know how I got into BYU. First of all, I guess let's clarify that. I don't know how I got in there, but I did. So I ended up at BYU with less than stellar grades. And then once I got in, they're like, hey, congratulations, all your college credits transferred over. And I was like, because when I was in high school, I thought I was an overachiever because I was taking college classes, so I didn't really pay attention. How would I say it? It wasn't like a great choice for someone who's not a genius, right? Which that's me, so not a great choice for me. But I read the book Moneyball. Have you guys heard of the book Moneyball? Or seen the movie, even if you guys know what that is? So it's a book about baseball, and it's about how they use analytics and data and economic stuff to figure out advantages in baseball. So I was like, man, heck, I want to work in baseball or I want to work in sports, so I'll study economics. So I got to BYU, I studied economics, I'm doing okay, good enough. And I get through school and I'm like on my last semester. I decided to sign up for a class from this guy, his name's Professor Curl. And he's like legendary at BYU for being the worst, the hardest professor, right? But his classes are really interesting because he's a genius. So I was like, oh, that'll be fun, like I'll get in there, I'll finish it, pass the class, and I'm done. I get in there, I didn't pass the class, so that was rough. But I was like close. I didn't pass the class by like 0.3%, my last class in college. So I already had like, I was gonna go on and do job, like I had a job ready, I had like everything ready. And then I had to go back and do another semester of school. I was like, oh, brutal. So I went back, and while I was there, I was like, well, I gotta get a job. Like I have to take care of that. So I got a job in the equipment room with this guy, his name's Mick Hill. And he actually just retired after 39 years. But I went in, he interviewed me, and he was kind of funny. Like his last question in the interview was like, can you fold towels? I was like, yeah, I can fold towels with one hand. So he was like, can you fold them? I was like, yeah, I can fold towels. So he gave me the job, and then while I was there, I fell in love with football. Because I hadn't been around it much, right? I fell in love with like the team aspect. Football is the ultimate team sport. Because nobody, like even on our team, Patrick, you saw what happened in the Super Bowl when he didn't have the right guys on the offensive line. Right? He just got destroyed the whole game. So you will all rely on each other. And the players were cool because they were humble, like they got it, right? I've been around only basketball players pretty much my whole life. They're hit or miss, those basketball players. They're hit or miss. I'm really not a team player. So I loved it. And I decided, I was like, man, if I can ever work in football, I want to work in football. So that happened because I failed the class, right? So I ended up saying, hey, I'd like to work in football one day. And then from that, the perspective of power, right? Perspective is power, right? So this kind of ties into what I'm talking about with. So I failed, I went to the equipment room, right? But then you talk about perspective. And Coach Reed, right, in the NFL, he's been a coach forever in the NFL, right? And we come in, we're like young coaches, and sometimes we'll get in meetings and we think that we know it all, right? We're throwing ideas off the wall, like, we should do this, we should do that. And he'll always kind of like sit back and say something really wise, like, oh, well, we tried that 20 years ago. It didn't work, but we can try it now if you guys want it, if you think it'll change. And we're always like, yeah, no, you're right. Like, it's not going to work. So he has a perspective, right? He understands. He sees things differently than us because of his experiences. And I don't think, it doesn't always have to be someone who's older, right? Your classmates, your peers, like, anybody can have a different perspective that you need. For me, right, my wife has a different perspective because she, so we got married young, right? She's younger than I am, but she's a good example of this. She had a different perspective. So I graduated from college after I worked in the equipment room. I went to work for a company called Goldman Sachs. They do stuff with money. I didn't know anything about them until I worked there, so you don't need to know what they are, but they do things with a lot of money. So it's like a big company. So I worked there for a little while. And while I was there, I would go home at night, and my wife one night, she could tell I wasn't love what you do. I was like, no, I don't. She's like, well, what would you do? If you could do anything, what would it be? I said, well, I'd like to work in football. She's like, okay. And I was like, well, coach if I can. But I don't know if, my dad coached all my life, and he like lost money coaching because he coached high school. I was like, well, I don't know if I can make money coaching. And she was like, well, we can figure it out. You know, if you're like in college with pros, you can make money. And I was like, yeah, okay, we can try it. She's like, well, let's try it now. We didn't have any kids. You know, we were just kind of, it was just us two. So she's like, let's take a risk. So we did. I quit my job, and we went to Baylor. Right? And while I was there, I was working, and I hadn't finished my degree, and I got a call from Coach Reed. Coach Reed was like, hey, you want to come be my assistant? You want to come be my right-hand man? And I was like, well, yeah, you know, as long as your right-hand man's okay, you don't have a right hand. That's fine. I will take it. So his main thing was like, how can you type? I was like, yeah, I can type. So he took me. But so my wife's perspective, right, she saw things differently. She saw what I could become, and she saw that I could be happy with my career. And she's the reason why, you know, we ended up where we did. Right? Her perspective was, hey, like, you can do this. I think you can do it. Which is crazy to think about, right? So I didn't play football. I had coached baseball, I had coached basketball, but I had never coached football. My only experience was in the equipment room, and she thought, you know what, you might be a great football coach, right? You could probably do that. So it's kind of this crazy perspective from her, but she saw it, right? And then Coach Reed saw it as well. He saw that I had potential. So that's the same with you guys, right? You have potential, and a lot of times you can't see it in yourself. Like, I was working at Goldman Sachs, and I thought, hey, you know, I have the potential to make good money here. I have the potential to, you know, move up, to take care of my family. But my wife was like, yeah, but you have the potential to actually like what you do, right, and do the same things. So I think it's important that we pay attention to those around us that have positive input into our lives, right? They care about what we're becoming, and they'll help us do it. And that they're off the wall with their, you know, hey, you could do this, right? It's not crazy. You could do this. I think it's good to listen to those people. So, now, if you guys have some questions, I think we got a lot of time, so you guys can ask a few questions. And then at the end of it, like I said, you guys, if you're interested, you can put the ring on. You can take pictures, like whatever. I just think it's good for you guys to hold stuff like that. You know, to see it. Like, hey, this kid came from Loa, Utah, which is like where I came from. He got one of these, so you guys can do it too.
Were you right-handed?
Yeah, good question. So they say I was right-handed when I was 4, but like it's hard to tell. And then I don't remember how like that. I don't remember needing to relearn much because I hadn't learned to write yet or any of that stuff. They were worried a lot with like my head injury, so I started school late. So I was old for my grade, and I still did bad in school. So there you go. But I had a buddy in high school who, no, I'm kidding. I didn't do bad. On my high school GPA, I think I had like a 3.6 or something. That's good. That's good. That's like, I got on by. My sisters all had 4.0, so I was like coming in last place.
You get my point, what I'm trying to say, though.
Yeah, they did. But a funny story about that, actually, if I was right and left-handed. So my buddy in high school, one of my best friends in high school, his dad was a doctor and his mom was a nurse. So he always like had these weird health facts he'd throw out at us, like crazy stuff. Like, where did you come up with that? Well, my dad was saying. So he came to me one day and he's like, Porter, I decide whatever you say, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to listen to what you say. I'm going to do it. And I was like, all right, buddy, what you got going on here? He's like, because I was talking to my dad, and he said when you're right-hand dominant, you use the left side of your brain more. And then he like listed off a bunch of things that they're good at. He's like, if you're left-hand dominant, you use your right side of your brain more, so you're this and this and this. He's like, you were right-handed before the accident, right? I was like, yeah. He's like, you're left-handed now, right? I'm like, obviously, yeah, left me now, but I got no choice. And he's like, both sides of your brain work. So that's the kind of guys that hung out in high school with. So.
I can't.
Oh yeah, good question. Yeah, so that's a good story too. So when I was at Baylor, my brother-in-law married a girl from Branson, Missouri, and they were getting married in the Kansas City Temple. So Kansas City in the middle of winter, like February or Christmas, it was Christmas time. Awesome place to not have a wedding in the winter is Kansas City. Okay, so but they decided to have them up there. So my friend, he married Andy Reid's daughter when we were in college. I didn't know this, but we had made like a deal. If we worked in sports, we tried to help each other out. And he married her, and then he was like, "Hey, I'm working for the Chiefs now." So I texted him when we went out to Kansas City, and he was like, "Come to a game. We got a game that week." So we went to the game. My wife was like pregnant. It was miserable. It was like the coldest game in regular season Chiefs history. It was rough. But after the game, we go over to, he's like, "Hey, just follow me." So I follow him, and we end up at Coach Reid's house. And then Coach Reid like walked in, and they played a joke on me because they were like, "Oh, you're sitting in this chair." So I'm like nervous. I moved. It was awkward. And then his daughter knew that we wanted to work together, so she did like this mock interview thing. So what are you studying? What do you do? What do you want to do? So and he was eavesdropping. He was like sitting next to us, listening in. And then at the end of the night, I was like, "Hey, I would pay money to follow you around and just like see how you build like a winner, you know?" And he was like, "Well, yeah, just hit me up when you're through with your school or whatever, and we'll do that." I was like, "Okay." So after the end of the season, he coached in the Pro Bowl that year. Because if you lose in the divisional round, you coach in the Pro Bowl. So he was coaching the Pro Bowl, and I called after the Pro Bowl. I texted my friend after the Pro Bowl, and he didn't respond. And I was like, "Wow, all right, thanks, bud." I just forgot about me. And then a couple days later, I got a call from a number I didn't know. And then they left a voicemail, and the voicemail was from Coach Reid. And he was like, "Hey, I got this job, you know, it opened up, but I got 2 or 3 guys I'm thinking about." And he told me the 2 or 3 other guys, and I didn't deserve the job. Like, honestly, I was like, "Wait, you're putting me in this group?" So he thought about it for a few days, and then he called me. He called me on a Friday. It was right before the Super Bowl where the Patriots beat the Falcons. Your buddy Tom. Yeah, that was crazy. But so they beat the Falcons. He called me Friday evening. He said, "I got to have you up here Sunday to start training." So I flew up. I left my pregnant wife. Flew up, and then from there we were in Kansas City. She had like the baby with the doctor she met like once. It was a mess. It was crazy times. But so that's how we ended up there. But a lot of days at work, like where, you know, because it does happen. I think about it. You know, like I play football. I kind of think about that sometimes. Like I don't know if I'm supposed to be here. But a lot of the time I just fall back on like, well, Coach Reid thinks I can be here. So and he knows. So I think that's a lot of things too. If people trust you, right? Like you kids, you high school kids, you're getting to the age now where like, if people trust you, you should reward that trust, right? Like Coach Reid trusts me. So every time I'm like, I think I can't do something, I fall back on like, nah, like I gotta do it because he thinks I can do it. So I think that you guys should realize that in your own life. If people give you something, a job, or they say like, "Hey, I trust you to do this," you better pay it back, right? Don't mess around with that.
So sometimes we feel like we're working pretty hard. Walk us through a week of your work.
Yeah, so in season, even in our off season, it's pretty crazy, but in season is probably the best example. So you game plan for each opponent and stuff. So we'll play the games on Sunday. If it's an away game, like if we play like Seattle away, like New England away, you come back to the facility, you go home and you take like an hour nap, and then you come back in and you work. And then you work, so that day, Monday, you work until like, so I mean, you gotta be back in at like 5:30 normally, 5 a.m., 5:30-ish. And then you'd work until about 11:30 or midnight. And then Tuesday is actually the worst day. So Tuesday you're in, I get in about 5:30-ish, 5:45, 6 if I try to like milk it a little bit. and then I usually would leave at like 1:30 or 2:30, and then the next day you're 8 a.m. And then the next day you're in at the same time. You got to be in by like 6 or earlier. And then that day's a little shorter, so it's like 12:30. And then Thursday's like midnight again. You're in at the same time. And then Friday's a really light day, so you get to leave work. You're still here at the same time, so that's like 6 a.m. You leave at like 3:30. So that's still a 17-hour day. That's the light day in the season. And then Saturday you travel, or you have like a light practice, and then you go to the team hotel. So, but that's, I mean, you pretty much just like survive. Your brain's not working right, you're all messed up. But that's the time you put in. I mean, but that's why, like in games, there's all these like little things that happen. It's like, oh, that was lucky, and it's like, not really, not very lucky. Like I spent 20 hours on that, so you know.
Question?
When you lost your arm, did you ever experience phantom pain? And
Yeah.
if so, do you still experience it today?
It's a good question. So I still have like nerve pain today still, but phantom pains have kind of gone away. When I first got it cut off though, there was things where like it would be itchy, and then I would scratch where it would be and then it'd go away. It's like really weird stuff like that. But then I have like the nerve pain I have. I think this is kind of funny too. So I found out this later. So they took a nerve out of my leg. I have like a big scar down the back of my leg, right down the whole calf. So they took a nerve out of my leg and they put it in my neck to try to fix it. But later on in college, I had to do a report on like anatomy. So I was like, oh, I'm going to do it. You had to do it on an injury that you had. So I studied the surgery they did. And the nerve in your leg that causes restless leg syndrome is the same nerve that they put in my neck. So I think the nerve pain is actually restless leg syndrome in my neck. So, but that's hard to explain to a doctor, right? Like, so there's this thing going on in my leg, it's in my neck, but I can't. So, that's kind of, yeah. Good question.
Other questions?
Right here?
Okay, so like you're on like your first day, right? Was it like exciting, like to go and see NFL players? It was like or it's like a totally opposite.
Yeah, good question. No, there's a lot of excitement. When I first got a job, it was like, holy cow, you know, like, it's a dream job, it's like all this stuff. And I think it's important too that we realize, like, I'm in, like, this is my dream job, and I don't love everything about my job, right? Like, a lot of you guys will work for your dream job, your dream whatever, and you'll get there, and there's days you don't like certain things. Like, there's days where I'm exhausted, first of all, and I'm just like mad at the world for the day. That's okay. I'm still working my dream job. I still love it. I'm still excited about it. But days aren't perfect, right? Even though you're like living the dream, it's not perfect. And I think I first encountered that when I was a missionary, right? So you go on a mission, you're like, yeah, this is the dream. I always wanted to be a missionary. You get out there and you like knock the first door and they're like, use words that you can't repeat. Get off my yard, like get off my porch. Like, oh, this is awesome. Dream job, right? It's like, that's not how it works, right? But you got to realize that you're living the dream stuff. So there's a lot of days where I sit down and I'm like, man, I caught warm-up passes with Patrick Mahomes today, and then I threw warm-up balls to Travis Kelce. Like, that's pretty awesome, right? But you guys, you have to do that for yourself. Like, you have to choose to be excited about what you're doing. You have to choose to be grateful for what you have, right? You make that choice. Because there's guys that I work with that hate what they do, right? Like, they hate what they do every day, and they do not realize, like, how lucky it is. Like, they don't have any idea what other people do to have what they have. So that's a choice. But yeah, I'm excited. Every day I'm excited. There's just some moments where I'm like, all right, that was not the dream moment I was hoping for. But, okay? More questions?
More questions?
You next.
Where do you go to?
Have
Oh,
you
sorry.
ever had anyone like go to shake your right hand?
Yeah, that's a good question. All the time. Yeah, so we're all get like, some people before they notice, like I'll reach with the left, and they'll go, we shake with the right around here. Be like, yeah, good for you. Sweet. Nice, tough guy. See you later. No, yeah, so that does happen a lot. And it's always funny. It's always like awkward. So, but you can tell, it's funny because you can tell a lot about a person the way they do that. It's interesting. Different personalities, the way they handle that situation. It's always funny. It's like, oh yeah, you're that guy. Good question. You got one right here?
What did you go to Baylor for?
What did I go to Baylor for? Yeah, good question there too. So I finished grad school in econ at BYU. And then at Baylor I studied, it's actually an education degree. So it's a master's in education with a sports management emphasis. So it's cool. My professors at Baylor, it was awesome. I love BYU, but I love Baylor too. It was awesome. Great experience. Expensive. It's an expensive school, but it was fun. A lot of fun.
Is it a private school like BYU, Baylor?
Yeah, so it's a private Baptist school. So it was pretty, people always crack jokes, and I'm like, oh, I went to BYU, and then I went to Baylor. They're like, Mormons and Baptists? Yeah. But they were cool. It was interesting how, I don't know, you can learn a lot from people, right? You should learn a lot from people, no matter where you're at.
Who's your all-time, NSL all-time least favorite player?
Can't remember your live stream.
Yeah, Tom Brady's like the obvious, but I actually respect him a lot. I hate losing to him. We've played him 6 times, I think 6, and we beat him half the time. Just not in the playoffs, man. Get out of here. It's hard not to respect what he does, though. Somebody in the other groups asked, what's the #1 attribute that's the difference between someone who's great and someone who's like Tom Brady. And he's so disciplined. I made fun of his diet earlier, TB12, but that dude is disciplined. He does everything, and he gives up so much to be so good. So that's pretty incredible. My least favorite player, probably anybody on the Raiders. I hate their whole team. No, they got I don't know, who's all going to see this?
It's on YouTube. So.
Okay, yeah, I'll leave it there then. I don't like the Raiders.
Next question.
So just talk about the approach of Kelsey and Mahomes and Tyreek Hill, what you see behind the scenes. We see Sundays, but what are you seeing during the week that separates them?
Yeah, so discipline's a big one, but then also how intelligent they are and how hard they work on that part of the game. A lot of people, no one sees it, but they're brilliant as far as how they read defenses and how they take advantage of, watching Travis Kelsey coach up the backup tight ends is incredible. Just what he says and how he uses his body, it's unbelievable. But just how they're technicians at what they do. It looks easy, but there's a million little things that they're going through in their head that make a big difference.
Do people ever give you grief about being from a small town?
Yeah, it's usually pretty funny. But then they always the most interesting thing to me, I guess, is I think a lot of the small town stuff that they think would be inherent with me is not. So they're always kind of surprised by that. We have a wide receiver coach. He was our wide receiver coach. He's awesome because we have conversations about racial issues, racial injustice, what it was like for him growing up versus me. And it's interesting how much common ground there is. And then it's funny to me too because he always comes back to well, but you're not really a white country hick farm boy because you went to LA for 2 years. You did that mission thingy, so you came back different. I'm okay. But it's just interesting to me yeah, that's fun to be able to have this conversation. But they make fun of me, how many people were in Hopeton? You didn't even have a football team? Yeah.
Did you ever work with Alex Smith?
Yeah, I did. My first year, yeah. Alex Smith is, I'm a BYU guy, obviously, so I hate Utah. And I wanted to hate Alex Smith. And then I really wanted to hate him. Dude, this guy. And then I worked around him. He's awesome. Like everything they say about his injury and like his comeback, and he's like that and better. He's a good dude. And his whole like thing, so he's the starting quarterback, right? And we bring in his replacement. And he just like handled that like a pro. Just awesome. So, yeah, I have a lot of respect for Alex Smith.
Anything else?
I got a question. If you could leave these guys with one thing that would stick with them, what would be your most important thing that you could say to them today that helped them in life?
Somebody in the other group asked, they asked the question about, I can't actually remember what the question was. They said what motivates, or what would you say about motivation?
Yeah, it was a middle school kid, and it was a pretty random question. It said, what about motivation? And then you went from there.
Yeah, what about motivate or something? I was like, oh, here we go. So, but I thought it was like a good question at the heart of it. But I think at the end of the day, like you guys, you got to realize that you're in charge of your own success. Like it's not, like she asked about motivation, and I said, I think that you should motivate yourself. Right? Like I don't, my mom always had a saying, and I mean, I use it with my son because he's crazy. He's like off the walls. He's all over the place. But he's awesome. But she used to say, I'd rather try to tame a stallion than motivate a mule. Right? It's a pretty good like farm saying. But the gist of it is like, you'd rather have to like hold a kid back. Like, whoa, take it easy. Which I think she spent like 90% of my youth like that. Like, hey, just chill, or just hold back a little bit. But I think that for you guys, you got to understand that it's not anyone else's job to motivate you. Like, that's not their job. Your teacher doesn't get paid to motivate you. Gino Oriema, right? You guys know who Gino Oriema is? Anybody? He's the head coach of the UConn Huskies girls basketball team. So like one of the all-time great coaches. But when his players come in, one of the first things he talks about is motivation. And he says, he's like, if I have to motivate you, then you're in the wrong room, right? Like, it's not my job to motivate you. Like, it's not my job to make you go hard, to take extra shots after practice, to run sprints, to play defense. Like, that's not my job. Like, either you come in here and you're motivated and you do it, or you're not going to be here long. Because there's other people who want to be here, right? And that's, I mean, in the NFL, if anything, that's heightened by what we do, right? You can be there one day, you can be the best in the world, and the next day you can be just garbage. You can be nothing. And it happens because of that, right? Like, guys come in, they're motivated, they take care of business, or they don't. So I think that's what I would leave with you, is like, you're not in charge of you. Like, you're in charge of your own success. You're in charge of the friends you pick, the people you surround yourself with. You're in charge of the people you listen to and the people you ignore, right? You're in charge of all that. So you can't blame it on anybody else. At the end of the day, that's you, right? So you choose. It's up to you. And if you want to be motivated, you want to get up at 5 a.m. and you want to work 20-hour days, that's up to you. Right? There's other people that'll do it if you don't, so you can stay home. They'll want the job. That's the crazy thing about my job too. Part of my job when I was with Coach Reed is his assistant is I'd open his mail. So like at the end of the season, I was opening up resumes for guys, like hundreds of resumes. And every single time I opened one, it was like, this guy wants my job, right? Like if you're not going to do it, someone else will. So that's how real it was for me. So if you're not going to motivate yourself, then step out of the way so someone else can do it, right? That's a hard reality, but it's a reality. So. Good question. That was solid. Sorry, that was a longer answer.
I watched you play in high school because you're my son said. How in the world how many hours did you just teach yourself how to shoot baskets without the other hand? You were amazing.
Yeah, that was, I mean, and Weston kind of alluded to that, but like, it's interesting how, you like saw me. What's your son's name?
Louis Stewart.
Okay, yeah. Rich beat us. So I'm up here talking to you guys, and they're like, he's a great basketball player, but they beat us. Like they beat us in the third and fourth game my senior year. So, but I did kiss their girls. So I did kiss them. I beat us on the court, but I beat them off. No, just kidding. Just kidding. No, I'm kidding. But So there was, I mean, I shot a lot, and I had to spend a lot of time. Playing basketball to get even close to like average. So that was the thing for me. It was like I had to put in way more time than everybody else if I was going to even be. Yeah. I mean, so my hand was too small to like grip the ball, so I had to use my chin to shoot when I was little, and I used to rub this. My skin would get so dry that it would crack and bleed. So. And then
I can speak to that a little bit because I watched it, right? So I knew Porter since he was little. And basketball, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours. He was always on the court. And in baseball, he had on the basketball hoop, he'd set up that little string. And I remember him out there batting that ball way into the dark. What the heck?
We had some older neighbors and they hated me.
And I think, folks, I hope that message isn't lost on you. But he talked a little bit about the hours. Anybody in here has potential to be pretty well what you want to be if you're willing to pay the price and you're willing to get up every time you get knocked down and you're willing to not use whatever stumbling block or life situation as an excuse. And I think that's the power in Porter's message. His challenge is pretty obvious. Every one of us in here has some challenges. Now, some of them aren't quite as obvious as missing a limb. But every one of us has got stuff that we could use as an excuse as, no, I can't because of this. But I hope you hear that loud and clear today. That if you're willing to get up every time you get knocked down and you're willing to use your failures and learn from them and put the time in, you can go be what you want to be.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because a lot of the, like, success is actually, even though it's played out in front of crowds, like you get a lot of fanfare and stuff, success is actually like a very lonely experience because you spend a lot of time alone working on your craft. Like, I used to hit off a tee. Weston says, like, the rope stuff. I used to hit off a tee for hours by myself too. You know, like I used to get blisters all over my hand, and you just like they pop and you keep going. You know, like you got to put in the work. So that's kind of how it is. Sorry, you got it. Yep.
Okay. So what's the best reaction you got when someone realized you were the
Yeah, that's pretty good. So Tyreek Hill actually was pretty good. So I walked into the facility. It was actually before I worked there. Oh no, it was when I started work there. He was like downstairs working out. I think he was like doing rehab or something. I don't know. But I walked by in the facility and he just like froze. And I didn't really know who Tyreek was either because he wasn't like a huge superstar yet. He was good, but not huge. He just like froze and watched me. And then like I walked back out again. He like did the same thing. And then in the weight room, he kind of like, I don't know if he follows it or something. He saw me getting those. He was like the whole time, just like little kid kind of status. What's happening here? And then later on, I was like eating dinner with like next to him once, and I was like, "You were so freaked out." And he's like, "I was, man. I was scared." So I was like, "What's wrong with that guy?" So it's funny. Yeah, that's. Yeah, it's like weird.
Were you ever bullied for not having a phone?
Yeah, I was. So the middle school, they just asked that same question. But yeah, I mean, and people still stare. Like that doesn't go away, you know. So that's hard. And I think as you guys like overcome things, you have to realize there's still going to be people that won't let it go. You know, like they won't let your failures go. Like they'll still remember, you know, the kid with one arm that didn't know how to tie his shoe, or like the kid who didn't play football. You know, like that's going to follow me around. People are going to bring it up, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day. But yeah, people did. I mean, they said things, and I had good friends who stood up for me a lot. But they would say stuff that was a little far-fetched too, like, "Oh yeah, he'll beat you with one arm and he'll hit home runs off you." I was always like, "I have to do that now. Like that's not fair to me." You know, so, but no, I would say too, once you've experienced that, like once you've been bullied or picked on, and I think everybody has somebody say rude things to them, that you empathize with other people. Like you can feel how it feels, help them out. You know, even if sometimes people don't like. If somebody makes fun of me, I don't need somebody being like, "Oh, I love you, bud. You know, you're okay." I need somebody to be like, you're a dork. Yeah, he's right. You got one arm, you look funny. You know, like, that's what works with me, right? Like, have somebody who's like, yeah, you're right, you are lopsided, you know, or something like that. So it's like, yeah, okay, you're right, let's go. So, but you need people like that. Who has the mic? Somebody has the mic. Then you have to.
Have you ever thought of getting a prosthetic arm?
I have. I have one, but I only use it for jokes mostly. But yeah, I got it, and they're like, I can do everything almost. So we'll see how this hand holds up as I get older. I might need one, arthritis or whatever, who knows. But I just feel like I don't really need one now. Yep.
Would you say that success is available to everyone regardless of their situation, like financial, physical, or mental?
Yeah, I would say that. I'd say, I mean, there's obvious limitations. There's obvious limitations, but I'd say that they can have success. And I think even on like, we all define success differently, right? So I have my son, this is like kind of personal, so, but so he's almost 4, but he doesn't really talk yet, right? He says words when he needs something, but he doesn't really talk. So for him, when I'm talking with him, success is like, oh, you said 3 words in a row, right? So, and then you build from there. But so I think for everybody it's different, but I think everyone can be successful, and they can have success, and they can feel what success feels like. Yep. Next.
So, weird question, but do you have any like one-sleeve shirts?
Yeah, I got a lot of them. All my long sleeve shirts, or all my long ones are sewn.
There's like sewn at the side?
Yeah.
Do you do that yourself, or?
Our equipment guy does it for me.
Really?
My sister does some of them. She's kind of expensive, so I have No, but they do a good job. Yeah, they like cap it. So cool. Pretty good.
All right, we'll go one more. That'll be done.
Have you ever tried to like drive a stick and have somebody else shift for you?
Well, I drive stick, and I don't have anyone shift for me, so it's dangerous, but it's fun. My friends, when I was in high school, my friends used to do this thing where they'd see like how many things can Porter do while driving. So it was not safe at all. And I do not recommend it. But it was good. I could do a few things.
I'm going to shift the lights. Okay, we got to get back, guys. I don't know how we do this so that seniors first. We've done all the younger kids first, to be honest.
Yeah, well, we're not first.
Sucks to suck. Yes, it does.
That's true. We can get the seniors back to class. So why don't we have seniors first, and then we get back.
I thought about you.
Hey, what's up?
Oh, wait, time.
I think we're kind of missing the point here, is that